Lola, a teaching and learning case study by Shi Yang, Rebecca Martinez, and Sarah Orozco. The background. Lola moved from China to Alaska when she was in the first grade. She is now in Miss Evans' second grade class at Glenmead Elementary School in Alaska. She knows some English but has difficulty reading and writing. She did kindergarten and first grade in China, and now she's in Alaska learning English. Lola doesn't speak up in class because she doesn't want to make mistakes. But Lola does like picture books and playing Chinese games, especially Chinese chess. Goals. Learners will be able to identify the main purpose of the story, and learners will be able to express their thoughts about what the author is trying to describe in the story. This comes from the Common Core Standards for Reading Standards in Grade 2, Number 6, is identify the main purpose of a text, including what the author wants to know, wants to answer, explain, or describe. So these goals are important because it helps the learner identify what the author is trying to describe, explain, or answer in the text. It's also important to find out the main purpose of the story because it can help the learner be able to identify the problem, the person, or just what the main text is about. Scenario. Mrs. Evans is teaching about the main purpose of the story and teaching what the author is describing. In this scenario, Mrs. Evans has noticed that Lola is having some difficulty understanding the main purpose and describing new words that Lola hasn't ever learned before in English. But Mrs. Evans thinks that Lola is just not paying attention according to her lesson plans. And Miss Evans noticed that all the student journals are in Chinese instead of English. So Mrs. Evans has a hard time assessing her in grades because of the languages written in Chinese. Appendix A shows the writing journals for Mrs. Evans' class, and you can tell it is all in Chinese. Scenario. Mrs. Evans asked the students to write their own story for a part of the assignment of finding out what the main purpose of the text is. Lola took longer to finish the assignment than the others. Lola's grammar is also not up to a second grade level. She has a very hard time putting words and adjectives into a sentence and putting them in the right order. Mrs. Evans gave Lola a C and left it at that. Appendix B shows that Lola's spelling and grammar was not correct and not up to second grade level. Appendix C shows Mrs. Evans' evaluation or assessment on Lola's performance. And overall, she has a C in the class, and she gave Lola some other grades to show for the assignments. Also, the teacher's observation said it was very difficult for Mrs. Evans to communicate with her, and she does not speak up in class. Also, her journals are in Chinese, and she cannot assess them in English. Mrs. Evans also thinks that Lola should be accepted into the ESL program, which is English as a Second